Sing out, we sing, holy is your name. We sing out, we sing, worthy is your name. We sing out, we sing, holy is your name. We sing out, we sing, worthy is your name. Oh, what is your name? What is your name? What is your name? Let every heart, let every tongue lift up your name. With all creation sing. Let every sound with heaven's praise. And with one voice, let all creation sing. Let every heart, let every tongue lift up your name. With all creation sing. Let every sound with heaven's praise. And with one voice, let all creation sing.
There's room enough. Oh, there's room enough. If everybody made a little space right by their side, oh, there'd be room enough. There's love enough. Oh, there's love enough. If everybody folded out their arms open wide, there'd be love enough. I'm never gonna let you go. I'm never gonna let you go. I'm always right behind. I'm always right behind. I'm never gonna let you go. I'm never gonna let you go. I'm always right behind you.
Good morning. Welcome to Watershed. We're so glad that you are here this morning, and whether or not you're joining us online, maybe Facebook or YouTube, or here in person, we're glad that you are here on this rainy Sunday morning. So if you're here in person, we want to invite you to stand as we begin this morning by singing together.
The breath inside my lungs is a gift from you. And I can't help but give back my gratitude. Oh,
Oh, the untamed heart of heaven, so wild and free. And we join with all creation. Oh, let us sing. And everything around me shouts of your glory. I want to be that way too. Your love is wilder. Your love is wilder. Your praise is rising up inside my soul. You're full of wonder. You're like no other. I could live forever in the overflow. I'll live forever in the overflow. There is no end to your heart, 'cause everywhere I am is everywhere you are. There is no end to your heart, 'cause everywhere I am is everywhere you are.
Your love is wilder. Your love is wilder. Your praise is rising up inside my soul. You're full of wonder. You're like no other. I could live forever in the overflow. Your love is wilder. Your love is wilder. Your praise is rising up inside my soul. You're full of wonder. You're like no other. I could live forever in the overflow. I live forever in the overflow.
Thank you so much for singing with us this morning. I want to give you a chance just to kind of look around and greet each other. I know it's kind of in cold and flu season. There's still COVID. There's still a lot of stuff going around. So you might not want to hug. You might not want to shake hands. But just smile. Just say hi, and then we'll continue singing together.
God was never angry. God was not against me. God was never far away. God's not disappointed. God's not keeping score, and God's not judging my mistakes. God is light. God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good. God is grace. God will never hide her face, 'cause God is. God is. God was never angry. God was not against me. God was never far away. God's not disappointed. God's not keeping keeping score in God's not judging my mistakes. God is light, God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good, God is grace. God will never hide her face, 'cause God is, God is, 'cause God is, yes, God is. God is light, God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good, God is grace. God will never hide her face. God is light, God is love. Do not fear, for God's with us. God is good, God is grace. God will never hide her face. I see so clearly now. God is in the mystery. God is always with me. I was lost, now I'm found. Everything I once thought, guided by the love. And I see so clearly now. God, I see so clearly now. God is in the mystery. God is always with me. I was lost, now I'm found. Everything I once thought, blinded by the love. God is, that God God was never angry, God was not against me, God was never far away.
Good morning. My name is David. I am one of the pastors here on staff, and I want to take, and I promise you, just a few minutes to tell you what's going on here at Watershed in the month of November, which starts the day after tomorrow. Shocking, I know. I don't remember really anything about October, which is unfortunate because it's my favorite month of the year. Anyway, so a couple things going on. First and foremost, just a reminder, we have this spiffy new calendar that has everything going on, whether it's something that's more formal, educational, something more fun and social. Not that educational cannot also be fun. It usually is. But everything going on here at Watershed is on this calendar, so please check it out probably every day. I want it to really guide and define your life going forward. So. But a couple things that we want to highlight. The first is Friendsgiving, a term we invented to talk about a really, really exciting gathering that's going to be happening in about 2 weeks, Sunday, November 13th in the evening. We are inviting all of you and your friends, hence the name, to fellowship with us, to use a very traditional churchy word. Really, we're going to be hanging out over a shared meal, and we're going old school. The whole thing, like, depending on where your last name falls, like in the alphabet, that will determine what you bring to this amazing potluck that we're planning. But we're not just going to feed you and eat together. There's more. Additionally, you get to hear from myself, the rest of the staff, the rest of the leadership here at Watershed, and a few other surprise people about not only everything that we did together, all of us together in 2022, but everything we hope to do together, once again, all of us together in 2023. Once again, it's going to be so much fun, and even if you don't think that second part sounds fun, the food part will be fun. So, kind of a classic youth ministry bait and switch. We provide the food, and then once we got you in here, then we tell you about all the cool ministry things we're doing. So, but seriously, it's going to be a great time. So check out that QR code. Go onto the calendar. Go onto the app. You'll get to see what you're assigned to bring food-wise based on the last name that your family gave you. And it's going to be great, so please check that out. Additionally, we have some educational social, because remember I said educational can be fun, some educational social events coming up in November as well. The first is Preface. Preface is where you should go if you're new. New-ish, been here long enough to be like, what is this place? I need to find out more. Go to Preface. It's a 4-week experience where you get to hear a little bit about the story of Watershed. You get to share a little bit about your story, hear the stories of others. They all intersect in these really beautiful ways. And any question that you might have about this community, the history of it, who we are, where we're going, you can ask it there. Safe place. So check out Preface. Totally free. Childcare is provided. Also free. But if you're not new, or maybe you've already been to Preface, you're like, oh, I want to do something in November, but I've already done that. Well, we have things for you as well. The first is our Liberation Gathering, which is also happening on, well, there's two. The first is on the 8th, and that's the in-person version of the experience. And then for those who are unable to make an in-person experience, there's a digital version happening the next week on Wednesday the 16th. And what this is an opportunity to hear a little bit about Watershed's heart for justice over the years. We're going to kind of walk you through what justice and liberation work has looked like historically here at Watershed, and then we're going to dream. We're going to dream a little bit about what it could look like specifically in 2023, and then kind of more in general. We want this to be continually ever more a community sort of solidarity-led endeavor here at Watershed. And so if that's something that you're curious about, if that's something that you're passionate about, if that's something that you want to lend your voice to, then we invite you to come. Because all this is happening simultaneously in November, childcare is, of course, free and provided for all of these things. Actually, we're not going to provide childcare for the online experience. You're on your own for that. But everything else, all the in-person stuff, there's childcare. Then, and this is going to get confusing, which is why the calendar is so important. So that's happening in person here on the 8th, and then starting the next week on the 15th, and then continuing through the rest of November, is Reclamation, which is an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper theologically or philosophically into some fun ideas. And what is a more fun idea than Christmas? Yeah, we're going to reclaim Christmas. You might not have known that it needed reclamation. It does. It does, and we're going to do that. We're going to reclaim the spirit of it. We're going to talk about all those confusing, controversial things. You know, the virgin birth, the way that some of the stories in the Gospels don't line up. You might not know that they don't line up and that there's contradictions in them. There are. We're going to explore those. It's going to be an amazing time. And again, like everything except for the digital thing, childcare is provided. So November is full of so much fun. And then the last thing for your kids. So yes, there's childcare. Some of the kids will go there. But some of the kids instead will hang out with Blair. And they're going to practice singing. It's going to be the most adorable thing ever. They're going to be getting set up for our Christmas Eve service. So we always like to include our youngins in that. And so if you have a youngin in your care and they want to be part of this experience, then they can do that while you hang out with me or Tommy or Matt or someone and do all that other fun stuff I just talked about. So all of this, again, can be found on the calendar, can be found on the app, it can be found if you follow that QR code. This is the magic super QR code that takes you to everything. So definitely use that. It's lovely to see you all this morning. Thank you for braving the dismal weather. And I'll catch y'all later, hopefully and all the fun November things I just told you about.
Who am I? Rambling at my reflection in the rearview light, following a stranger, praying for a fight, or the strength to get back on my knees again. This light, glowing neon in the corner of my mind, burns and burns but leaves no warmth behind. I kinda wish you'd just done it in the dark. And oh my God, we're here again. It all slows down to lines in the sand. Will I give out only that which I myself was given once? Where is all the mercy that was promised us? Perhaps we asked too much, could have just as well been me, brought before them head down in that midday heat, only defined by my most heinous deed. Who would trace a finger through the dust? Oh my God, we're here again. It all slows down to lines in the sand. All we can hope is that we suffer well when the cycle ends, when there's tales to tell, when it reaches me. Let me be a stone catcher, please. And oh my God, we're here again. It all slows down to lines in the sand. Oh my God, we're here again. It all slows down to lines in the sand. And all we can hope is that we suffer well when the cycle ends and there's tales to tell, when it reaches me. Let me be a stone catcher, please.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Matt O'Neill, and one of the roles that I serve here is that of being the lead pastor. And I know some of you came here this morning. I'm sorry, hold on a second. Am I on? No. There I am. I am on now. Let me start that again. My name is Matt. And, excuse me, one of the roles I serve in here is that of lead pastor. Some of you came here specifically this morning to hear Cedric. This is not a bait and switch, I promise you. He's going to be up here in just a moment. And also, if you're brand new with us today, there's this announcement that we kind of have been teasing towards for the past few weeks. And so this is a little like an in-house, almost like family conversation here at Watershed. So you kind of get to observe this is how they handle different transitions or announcements that they're kind of excited about. So I want to give you the option of just sort of opting out of anything I'm going to say, but observing, and then also opting in if that's something that you feel like would be enjoyable to do. So in February of 2020, Watershed was burgeoning. Like, it was so happening around here. People showing up, a lot of life and energy. In February 2020, we had just hired Blair Gore, and 3 weeks into her experience as our kids pastor, the pandemic hit. She didn't even know how to check kids in yet. It was that early in her experience. Everybody pivoted. She pivoted in kids ministry, greenhouse. We went to an online format like just every other church in the world. And that kind of lasted till, last spring when we started to re-engage here at Watershed. And during that season where there was nothing happening here, where we weren't gathering, we pivoted and started to utilize some of the empty classroom spaces, and we took on some rental opportunities. And so we had different businesses. We had some like daycares or kind of homeschool type folks that rented our space. That was really helpful, y'all, because as giving started to decline, that really created some stability to help offset some of that this decline and help make ends meet. And then as we started to regather in 2022, as we started to regather in 2022, we held on to 3 of those rooms to rent. And that worked really well. That worked well because it gave us some financial space as the tide was rising. Currently, those 3 classrooms, which are occupied by Jeff Cravata Photography, Chiropractic Light, and Q Fitness and Wellness, that strategy supports our community to the tune of about $70,000, which is a huge chunk of our $66,000 budget. A budget that, if I can be transparent, is really lean given the size of our community, the way that we partner with organizations outside of Watershed, and a staff that consists of 4 full-time, fully employed pastoral staff here, along with 6 part-time staff if you include our teaching team. Pretty amazing. The point I'm making is being able to rent that space has saved us, almost. And I say almost for this reason. As the tide has started to come back in terms of people, as the tide of giving has started to come back, the number of kids are coming back. And so, like, we've got this really important sort of income pipeline that's coming into our community, but now we're starting to be stressed by the amount of kids that are showing up. That is a good, really good problem to have. Which brings me to the sign that maybe you saw in the downstairs space, or maybe you smelled paint this morning. There's been this concerted effort to try to address 2 major problems here over the last 4 months. One, we're outgrowing our kids' space. We can't let go of those rooms because the tide is still coming back budgetarily. And we've been talking about this over the last several months, we're looking at the second year in a row of a pretty significant deficit in our year-end budget to the tune of about $58,000 to $60,000 at this point. Simply put, this pandemic decimated Watershed in a lot of ways, and it's just taking us longer to recover from that than we had hoped for. But this sign downstairs is sort of a beacon towards something we think is really hopeful and really actually kind of providential. So about 3 months ago, we were thinking about all these different variables. the need for space, the deficit, 2023. And we started to think about what could it look like for us to reimagine the downstairs. The downstairs right now is an exact footprint of this space upstairs. It's a lot of square footage. And what could it mean for us to develop that space specifically with our greenhouse and our shed students in mind? And this really took on some energy for a couple of reasons. First of all, we think this would create an upgraded experience for both our kids and our students. We've never had a blank box that we've looked at and went, well, wait a minute, we get to do whatever we want with this. We've always wanted that, but really we've always kind of had to live within the literal physical structures of whatever facility we've been in. We've been in 5 different facilities. This is our 5th, actually. Yeah, this is our 5th facility, and we have an opportunity now to take something and go, all right, what would it be like to create an actual kids/students experience in this blank space? The downstairs allows us to meet the growing classroom needs. If we were to focus on the downstairs and build that out in a way that makes sense for our kids, that actually gives us 9 total classrooms to work with instead of just 5 or 6 right now. And 9 was where we were. That was the number of classrooms we had to work with pre-pandemic. More rooms means better age-appropriate grouping. So, for instance, right now, as we've started to come back, there's been seasons where we've had like pre-K grouped all the way up through 2nd grade. That's not ideal. Kids need to be more with like kids of their own age, and having more classrooms allows that to take place, and also allows there to be a better adult-to-child ratio. Down the road, this gives us more opportunities as well to split into larger classrooms as we outgrow space, and eventually, ideally, almost every grade level or every age group could have their own room with very specific developmental communication, discussion, and teacher training. And this is a direct quote from Blair for the record. This move allows us to separate our middle school and high school into their own spaces, and our preschool rooms to be more separate and protected up here in the upstairs. Keeping the little ones close to mom and dad is important, so they would be able to stay up here. And these are 2 things that have been needed for a long time as we've continued to grow post-COVID. This also gives us a large gathering space for our kids and students. So while there's all of these rooms that can be built out downstairs, there's actually about a 1,500 square foot of open space that our kids could gather together with one another, almost like what we get to do here as adults. This is incredible. Like to be able to have kids in the space and sing-alongs or do large group teaching, storytelling, music. I mean, we've just never had anything like that. It's absolutely unprecedented. This can all happen with this space being developed. It's also can be a dual purpose because it could serve as a mid-size space for any sort of adult need as well. Anything from Neurakin to leadership training to potting shed, preface, reclamation. All of these environments happen often outside of Sunday morning, but there would be space for anywhere between 60 to 80 people to be accommodated downstairs, and for that to happen would be incredible. There's lights and a stage and sound system and screens. I mean, it would just be absolutely phenomenal, not just for our kids, but also for our adults. So there's a ton of upside in focusing our energy to the downstairs. But this does something else as well. Gaining 6 rooms downstairs while continuing to have 3 rooms upstairs for our kids actually also frees up 3 more rooms. Remember, we're going into the year with a $60,000 deficit. To be able to infuse our community or to increase those room rentals beginning in January from 3 to 6 infuses Watershed with an additional $70,000. That's a total of $140,000 throughout the next year towards our annual budget. And this will serve as a radical pressure relief valve for our community as the tide rises. It's a stabilizing element as generosity continues to come back. So I know I said a lot there. And some of you might be doing the mental math in your head and asking questions like, okay, that's really great. how are we supposed to pay for all this, Matt? You know, we're $60,000 behind. I'm sure it's not inexpensive to build out the downstairs. And this is where this gets really, really, I would say, interesting and inspirational. The cost of renovating the downstairs is about $52,000. But I want to remind you, going that route is investment because it generates $72,000 or $70,000+ next year and potentially the year after that, for however long we need to work with this sort of situation. But I started bouncing this off a few people about, 6 or 8 weeks ago. And we've already raised the $52,000. Yeah, right? Thank you. Somebody gasp. Yeah. I used less rosy language when I was describing it a few weeks ago, but some families, some folks that love this place said this place is special. What's happening here is important. What's happening here for our kids is important. We're in. $52,000. And so for some of you, you're like, okay, that's great. Talk to me about the 60, Matt. What about that deficit? I wish I could say, oh, that's all raised too, but it's not, sort of. The long-term solution continues to be recurring giving. When we stood up a year ago and said, we have to raise another $60,000 to $70,000 over time, will you do this with us? 5 monthly, more than $100 recurring givers each month. Can we do this Watershed? All right, we're going into November. We're at 48, y'all. We got 2 months left, and we're right on track. We're like right there. We're first and goal, and we can just push that into the end zone. That would be incredible these last 2 months. But that's the long-term solution. That doesn't necessarily get us to where we need to be in terms of the deficit. The short-term solution are one-time gifts, designated gifts. $60,000, it's a lot of money, or at least in my household it is. To Watershed, that's a lot of money. It's almost a tenth of our budget. But we have 2 months left. Given all the things that have transpired over the last 3 months, I'm starting to believe this can happen. Some of you give every month. Thank you. Please continue to stay that course. But what if November and December you decided to do something extra and you started to maybe help us in the recovery process by taking on just a little bit more in that regard? Some of you have been waiting for this moment to be inspired and go, all right, I'm going to jump in at some level. What if November and December was that experience for you? What if this was the moment you said, either I'm going to do something to help in the recovery process, or I'm going to take on recurring, or maybe both? And then for some of you, because of the way that your finances are organized, a year-end gift works really well because of tax reasons. Those are real legitimate ways to jump in, things I hope you will consider. And by the way, this is the kicker. When I was talking about this, again, floating these ideas around to people and saying, here's what we're thinking. What do you think? A few folks got really excited. And they said, so you got the basement covered, right? Yeah, the basement is covered. Well, we want to like allow our generosity to work in symphony with the rest of the community. And so collectively, this group of people pulled together $25,000 and created a matching program. They said for every dollar that's given here towards the recovery process between now and the end of the year, we will match it dollar for dollar up to $25,000. So if you give towards that part of what our need is, it's like double the impact, right? So simply put, this project is already underway. We're well beyond the halfway point. There's stuff going on in the basement that you are not allowed to see, all right, because we want to keep it a little bit of a surprise. But if we meet our deadlines, which I think we will, by the last Sunday in November, we will be in our new space downstairs. That's 4 weeks. This thing is screaming forward. And so will you consider being a part of it with your resources? Will you help us these last 2 months create the rise and tide that allows us to finish the year with our feet under us a little bit better. And while there is certainly a financial piece to this, I owe it to you to talk about what I'm going to describe as maybe an embodiment piece. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but it takes 50 volunteers who serve 1 to 2 times a month to pull off shed and greenhouse experiences for our kids here and our families. 50. That's a lot. I mean, look around in this room. There's not, like, what is there, 70, 80 people in this room? So just like the tide of generosity is slow to rise, the literal pool of human people, although people are always human, right? The tide of people has yet to rise. It's coming back. But I'm telling you this because in order to open the 2 classrooms that we need to open, like we need to do this because they're growing. And we have the space now. We need 15 to 20 more volunteers. And I'm telling you this because I'm asking you to stretch yourself, right? Like I know for some folks, it's like, this is my break. This is the way I kind of breathe on the weekend, which is totally legitimate. It's like we want you to have that experience here. And would you stretch yourself moving forward? Is there a way that you would say, you know what? I'm willing to go through some orientation. You know, there's the environment that Blair creates in the experience of serving is phenomenal. Friendships get made through that experience. Connection gets made through that experience. And there is no matching program for adults. I just want to name that. It's not like if you show up, like 2 more people are going to show up. It's literally the humanity in this room or within the sound of my voice. And so here's the thing. There's a QR code on the screen. Yep, there it is. And there's 2 things I want to invite you to consider. One, in terms of the deficit and the generosity, if you click on that QR code, at some point you're going to get to a drop-down menu. If you're talking about the deficit recovery, make sure you choose that drop-down option. Otherwise, choose the general option if you want to sign up for recurring giving. It's real clean and simple that way. And then the other QR code is for kids here. The volunteering with Greenhouse in the future. And there's going to be, these things are going to be kind of around the building on some of the doors and stuff as you leave. I'm going to be down front this morning after this, and I'm going to hang out for as long as I need to talk with you, to hear questions or feedback around what's taking place. I want to hear it all. If you're a parent, if you could go get your kid first and come back, your child, that would be great. But there's something at work in this community. I was talking with Mark and Sasha on the way in. It feels like there's a groundswell of generosity and love. Like some of you drive 40 minutes to get here on a Sunday. That's amazing. You're coming here because you sense transformation and arguably something divine and something that we surmise is deeply rooted in the Spirit of Jesus, deeply rooted in Christ, and will you be a part of it? Thank you so much for indulging me. This is the longest announcement I hope I ever have to make in this community. And Cedric, you can keep it under an hour, right? 30 minutes. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
I used to play baseball growing up, and that include playing baseball for my high school. And there's one particular guy on my baseball team that I just did not get along with, which sometimes happens on baseball teams. We weren't quite Kobe and Shaq because, neither one of us were that good, but, we didn't get along nonetheless. And I tended to sit on the bus kind of whenever we went on road games by myself. It's not that I didn't have friends on the team or didn't get along with most guys on the team. Actually, most of them I grew up playing baseball with, but I was also, if you've heard any of my story before and heard me kind of describe my adolescent experience, there's nowhere I really fit in. So, I had a whole bunch of acquaintances in school and not very many friends. All that being said, a big part of who I was also this kid of faith who was trying to be a good Christian. And so most of our contention was him picking on and teasing and messing with me. Today we would call it bullying. But back then we would just call it somebody being a jerk. But it was straight up bullying. Let's call it what it is. All that being said, I, for the most part, wouldn't react. I wouldn't respond. I would, let it go and not make a big deal about it because, here I am. I'm trying to embody Christ, my Savior. Until I didn't. And one day, we're sitting on the bus on our way to a road game, and he's just messing with me, and he's picking with me, and all of a sudden, I just snapped. And for the next 5 minutes, I verbally tore him down to nothing. I didn't cuss. I didn't swear or use any profanity, but it was as though for the entire time we had been on the team together, I had been keeping this running list of all these little idiosyncrasies about him and all these little things, and I basically started to unleash all of those things to the point that the rest of the bus was in stitches, and even my coach was sitting there with this little grin on his face like he had it coming. But I've been a person who doesn't really struggle with anger, at least that's what I thought. And so even then, I didn't feel very good about it. This morning, I'm going to be continuing in our series that we began last week, The Places We Go. And as Sean detailed last week, this series is our own little exploration of the book, The Atlas of the Heart, Mapping Meaningful Connection in the Language of Human Experience by Brené Brown. This week, I will be talking about the places we go when we feel wronged. In the book, Brené Brown highlights 6 different places or emotions we experience when we feel wronged: anger, contempt, disgust, dehumanization, hate, and self-righteousness. Today, I want to talk most specifically about anger. You see, for most of my life, I've had a problem with anger. Notice I didn't say I have an anger problem. I have said that I have a problem with anger. So let's go back to the beginning, shall we? The beginning of my problem with anger goes back a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You see, when I was a kid, I used to watch Star Wars: A New Hope every single weekend on VHS, which my dad had recorded off a laser disc. That's right, I'm that old. Black don't crack. I've said it before, I'll say it again. But yeah, the first time I ever saw Star Wars: A New Hope was on Laserdisc, and those things were expensive, which is probably why it didn't survive VHS, because it was a lot cheaper. I digress. But being that I am a lifelong Star Wars fan, and I'm talking whether it is the original trilogy, the prequels, the postquels, or whatever we're calling them, that just recently finished that series. I'm talking about the animated Clone Wars on Cartoon Network. I'm talking about the animated Rebels and Bad Batch series, or the Disney Plus streaming series. I'm here for it, okay? Which, side note, right now, the best television show on TV right now this year is Andor. Just telling. Yeah. I didn't hear any amens. David must not be in here. But yeah, I mean, it really is the best one out right now. I mean, if you disagree with me, come at me. Just don't choose violence. When I was a kid, Return of the Jedi was my favorite, which probably had something to do with what it was the only one to that point I had actually seen in the movie theater. But those of us who, love Star Wars, we all know that the best one is Empire Strikes Back. And I didn't really come to realize that until I actually saw it in the theater when they re-released all the original movies in 1997. And that's when I had to admit, yeah, Empire Strikes Back is the best of the bunch. So, for the rare few of you who have never seen Empire Strikes Back, which I'm not judging, so calm down. The protagonist of the film, Luke Skywalker, is seeking to complete his Jedi training, and he journeys off to the planet of Dagobah in order to find Jedi Master Yoda. Let's see how long it takes for somebody to tune out. In one exchange during his training, Yoda tells Luke, "But beware of the dark side, anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they." In the prequels, Yoda says it in an even more succinct and memorable way, presenting it like an equation. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Suffering leads to the dark side. You see, that was very impressionable idea for me as a kid that helped solidify the idea and belief that anger is bad. Not only is anger bad, but rarely, if ever, does anything good come from the experience of anger. So add on to Master Yoda, the other wisest person I had been exposed to was Jesus. Raised in the church, the impression I was given about Jesus when it came to anger was that Jesus was never angry. Somewhere along the way, I got the impression that anger was akin to sinning. Sure, it wasn't the same thing, but sin wasn't far behind. Sure, Jesus may have been angry a handful of times, but unlike myself, he would be completely justified in his anger and did so without sinning. Is anybody tracking with that one? Experienced that one? Okay. I brought those sentiments toward anger right into my adolescence. In my early teenage years, I would actually cry a lot. I can remember my parents getting on my case about crying a little too often, especially in disagreements and misunderstandings with my mother. They perceived that I was crying because I was being a little too sensitive. In actuality, I was angry. In some situations, I was pretty ticked off, frustrated, or even irate. But I was working really hard to suppress those feelings based upon what I understood about anger. Sometimes it became so hard and difficult, it would literally seep out of me in the form of tears. It was as if I was working so hard to be angry that I was in pain and would cry because, though frowned upon, crying would be more acceptable than being angry. Add on to that the stigma of ABMS, or angry black man syndrome, meant I understood as a token black man, one of the rules is that I don't get to be mad or angry about anything, at least not anything people deemed white aren't angry about. Even then, my anger cannot exceed theirs. I think the same can be said about women in general. I rarely, if ever, got angry, even and including when I felt like I had been wronged. I've often experienced other people being angry for me, and in some cases being upset with me that I'm not more angry about an injustice or an offense that was done to me. Kind of reminds me of what Kim said a couple of weeks ago about feeling like Judas, betraying and committing treason against oneself. Again, it's not that I never got angry. But due to my latent belief that being angry was wrong, most of my life I've been disconnected from my anger. except for brief moments like the one I described at the beginning of this talk, where all the pressure from holding and stuffing all that energy in my body would erupt like a volcano. And much like a volcano, onlookers would marvel and be in awe of what they had believed to be dormant come alive in ways they had never imagined, unless, of course, it was the person the anger was directed at. All that being said, I wouldn't have thought of myself as an angry person or a person who gets angry often. The Enneagram, maybe you've heard of it, has been a big epiphany for me. Fortunately, I was introduced to it before it became this fad where people started treating it like a parlor trick, where people would basically tell other people what their number was and rob from them the journey of self-discovery. Because that's kind of the point, not to be like, hey, look, I can pin you. No, give them the opportunity to find that out and discover it on their own. I digress, but please keep that in mind. I'm one of those people who didn't even need to take the test in order to discover my number. Upon reading in-depth descriptions of each number, I knew with certainty that I inhabit the 9. However, there was one moment in learning about the Enneagram that gave me a brief pause as to whether or not I truly inhabit the 9. It was upon learning about the triads that the numbers are grouped into, and that 9s, along with 8s and 1s, were part of the gut or anger triad. I thought to myself, wait, what? That can't be right. But upon reading and learning further, it totally made sense. You see, 8s, the challenger, as they're often known as, they wear their anger on their sleeve. You're going to know when they're angry because they are not going to hide it. 1s, which are also referred to as the reformer or perfectionist, like they're angry, but they don't have time for it yet. They're going to set it aside while they try to work things out, reform things, perfect things, and then they'll get to whatever it is that they're angry about. But 9s, such as myself, we are referred to as peacemakers, mediators. So we, as I've already described, fall asleep to our anger. We bury our anger. We suppress our anger until there is nowhere for it to go, and boosh, there it is in all its glory for a good 5 minutes, and then it's gone. And we're sitting there left in its wake feeling awful, right? Because we're supposed to be the peacemakers. We find it not only disruptive for the people that we've directed our anger at, which is really a big part of the reason why we suppress it, because we're afraid that our anger is so wild and uncontrollable that it will just disintegrate everything in its path. But it also leaves us feeling terrible on the inside because that inner sea that we want to be even has gotten really, really choppy. But enough about the Enneagram. That's not what we're here to talk about this morning. Here's the thing. According to researchers, in her book, Brene says that anger is an emotion that we feel when something gets in the way of a desired outcome or when we believe there's a violation of the way things should be. When we feel anger, we believe that someone or something else is to blame for an unfair or unjust situation and that something can be done to resolve the problem. Anger is an action emotion. We want to do something when we feel it, and when we're on the receiving end of it, getting tongue-tied. Angry feelings can vary in intensity from mild irritation or annoyance to fury and rage. Anger is an action emotion. We want to do something. In the book, she refers to it as a full contact emotion. It activates our nervous system and can take over our brain and our bodies. There's a real need for us to learn to regulate and cope with our anger rather than, and this is the part that hit me like a ton of bricks, holding on to or expressing chronic anger, because it can take a toll both on our mental and physical health. So as someone who has mostly experienced anger by falling asleep to it, and only within the last number of years recognizing that I have a problem with anger, again, not an anger problem, I began a journey, one I'm still learning, of how to be responsibly angry. The first step in that journey was to reckon with some bad Christology in regards to whether or not Jesus ever got angry. If he had some special exemption to being angry because, he's one with God and is perfect and yada, yada, yada. So the go-to example of Jesus being angry is Jesus flipping tables in the temple. It goes a little something like this. It can be found in Matthew 21, verses 12 through 14. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the table of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you made it a den of robbers." And the blind and lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. So Matthew places the story in the beginning of Holy Week, the week that began with Jesus entering into the city of Jerusalem and ended with him being crucified. As a kid, I had always understood that Jesus was upset that money changers had basically just set up shop in God's house and turned it into a strip mall. That it would have been all right if they were doing that somewhere else, but now my understanding, with more context, I understand that Jesus would have likely done this regardless, and here's why. They were setting up, selling pigeons and other different animals that people who were journeying to Jerusalem, to the holy city, to the temple, to partake and participate in sacrificial offerings to, in their understanding, make them right with God. And it would be people from every different socioeconomic class, including the poor. And a lot of times the poor could not afford to bring their own, say, calf or one of the animals that was the, quote, prescribed or preferred animal for sacrifice. So instead, they had to bargain or barter in order to buy other animals like a pigeon that they could then use for their sacrifice. And you had money changers out there, in essence, making a profit for this system that was meant to be a way for people not to have a barrier between them and God. Instead of tearing down that barrier between them and God, it helped just upgird it even more and monetized it. And so Jesus is rightly ticked off that this is happening, but not so much because it is offensive to God, because it is God's house, but because it's offensive to the very humanity that he has incarnated the divinity and spirit of God in, that he dwelled among us as one of us. He is offended for you. He's offended for me. He is offended for humanity, and he flips the tables in his anger. His anger isn't directed at the money changers so much as it is directed at the very things that embody this injustice. He's being responsible with his anger, even in the little act that we like to say, or as the kids like to say, he's choosing, Siri, not now. Lord, don't you hate it when that happens? Now I'm angry. All right, I'm gonna have to work that out and figure that out. Anyway, all that being said, Jesus is offended for us. His anger then fueled what he did next, which was to start healing people without requiring anything of them, without perpetuating more injustice, without requiring anything's blood be shed. The second step in that journey of being responsibly angry was learning what was behind that anger. The psalmist says, "Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord." Psalm 4, verses 4 and 5. So I love that this verse, the psalmist basically gives us permission to be angry and says, in your anger, do not sin. But then he goes on to say, ponder in your own hearts on your own beds and be silent. Now that kind of, for me, almost sounds like it's like, hey, be angry, but don't make a big deal about it. But could it be that what the psalmist is saying is be angry, but take some time to sit quietly and reflect and get down to the root of what it is that is behind your anger? Oftentimes, when I'm angry, there is a lot of peripheral noise. And I need to actually allow myself to enter into what equates to a sort of silence so I can get underneath what it is that is really bothering me. In the book, they give this graph. Behind anger might be loneliness and rejection. Could be fear, and underneath that fear is anxiety, frustration, confusion, isolation, sadness, hurt, and grief, shame and guilt. Heck, I had to deal with a situation with some young people this week where one person was angry because he basically felt humiliated, and the person who did the thing that humiliated, it wasn't intentional, but then they were angry because they were feeling shame and guilt. They were feeling embarrassment. But otherwise, it was just like, oh, they disrespected me. When we were actually able to talk about it, it was like, yeah, you know what, actually, yeah, I was just a little bit embarrassed. And I just wanted the situation to go away, and that was fueling the anger. Overwhelming stress, helplessness, jealousy, and outrage at injustice. There's a number of things that could be behind the anger. Being able to name what is behind my anger enables me to do the third and final part of being responsibly angry. That is to allow my anger to fuel and energize me to create and cultivate good things. Perhaps my favorite quote in the entire book is this: anger is a catalyst. Holding on to it will make us exhausted and sick. Internalizing anger will take away our joy and spirit. Externalizing anger will make us less effective in our attempts to create change and forge connection. It's an emotion that we need to transform into something life-giving: courage, love, change, compassion, justice. Anger is the most compassionate response to injustice. Like, for me personally, that was huge, because as this person who has been always known as a person who's really nice, and which is true, and doesn't generally get angry, verdict's still out on that one, right? But the way I had existed in so many of the spaces that I existed in, when my anger at the injustice in the world or in our country over the last few years bubbled to the surface, all of a sudden, people did not know what to do with me. And it wasn't even that I was being irresponsible with my anger. I was just sharing why I was upset. And I was sharing what needed to be done about the injustice. And people would be like, Cedric, you've changed. You seem to be angry. And at first, like, I'm not angry. I'm just, and I finally said, no, you know what? Yeah, I'm angry. I'm mad as hell. And I'm allowed to be angry because this is something worth being angry about. And there was compassion behind that anger of not just like, this is screwed up, let's burn everything down, but like, let's make it better. Let's resolve it. Let's work to fix this. Let's put things to right. Much like Jesus doesn't stop at flipping the tables, he goes out and he heals people. That's what I want my anger to be and lead to. So, in closing, I share this verse with you, and I hope it's not too triggering. Ephesians 4:26 through 27. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. First, as we've already said, be angry. Allow yourself to feel it and call it what it is. So often, the do not let the sun go down on your anger has been weaponized in relationships, especially in marriages, to force folks who aren't ready or still processing to immediately reconcile and get over it. That is not what this is about. Could it be that the idea of not letting the sun go down on your anger is basically saying resist being perpetually angry? Resist being angry all the time, from one sun up to sundown to sun up to sundown, and so on and so forth. But then also, it says, and do not give opportunity to the devil. Which I'm tempted to make a Halloween joke, but it's going to fall flat. It's All Hallows Eve, celebration of the saints, not all that devil stuff. Anyway, another part of my evangelical past, sorry. The word devil, the name Satan, it's often actually translated into sometimes accuser, but also deceiver. And one of the ways that it can oftentimes be deceived is we are deceived. Let me just say it this way. Beware of being deceived into internalizing your anger and letting it morph into contempt. Beware of being deceived into externalizing your anger and letting it transform into self-righteousness. The kind of self-righteousness that positions you callously above the offense, infraction, or injustice and unwilling to bring your self-proclaimed brand of goodness into it. That is simply happy to be better. I don't know where you all are at in your own personal journey with that emotion of anger, or more specifically, where you go to when you feel wronged. Right now, we oftentimes have to navigate negotiating whether or not we even have the right to be offended. And even then, so much energy is expended in negotiating that oftentimes we are left exhausted and unable to actually allow that anger, that emotion, to be the fuel that energizes us into whether it be reconciliation, whether it be restoration, whether it be just creating good things that resolve that issue, or cultivating more good things. But at the end of the day, it just simply starts with calling it what it is. Getting underneath what is at the source of that. So then we can be galvanized into doing something productive and life-giving about it. So, Watershed community, as you go into your day, as you go into your week, may you know that the divine has given you permission to be angry. May you not stay angry forever, but may you also go and flip the tables that need to be flipped, but also seek to be healed and heal others. Amen? Amen.
We're going to do something a little bit different this week, and we're going to sing something over you. We're going to allow you some space to absorb everything that you just heard and we're going to sing a song for you and give you some room to listen, maybe to check in with yourself, some of the ways that maybe there's some emotional repression, and just give you some room this morning. So whatever you need in these next few moments, I hope you can have.
Dear blessed Creator, dear Mother, dear Savior, dear Father, dear brother, dear Holy Other, dear sibling, dear baby, dear patiently waiting, dear sad and confused, dear stuck and abused, dear end of your rope, dear worn out and broke, dear going alone, dear running from home, dear righteously angry, forsaken by family, dear jaded and quiet, dear tough and defiant, I pray that I'm heard, and I pray that this works. I pray if a prayer has been used as a sword against you in your heart, against you and your word, I pray that this prayer is a plowshare of sorts, that it might break you open, it might help you grow. I pray that your body gets all that it needs, and if you don't want healing, I just pray for peace. I pray that your burden gets lighter each day. I pray the mean voice in your head goes away. I pray that you honor the grief as it comes. I pray you can feel all the life in your lungs. I pray that if you go all day being brave, that you can go home, go to bed feeling safe. I pray you're forgiven. I pray you forgive. I pray you set boundaries and openly live. I pray that you feel you are worth never leaving. I pray that you know I will always believe you. I pray that you're heard, and I pray that this works. Amen. On behalf of the last and the least, on behalf of the anxious, depressed and unseen, amen. For the workers, the hungry, the houseless, amen. For the lonely and recently spouseless, amen. For the queers and their closeted peers, amen. For the bullied who hold in their tears, amen. For the mothers of little black sons, amen. For the kids who grow up scared of guns, amen. For the addicts, the ashamed and hungover, amen. For the callous, the wise and the sober, amen. For the ones who want life to be over, amen. For the leaders who just lost their baby. Amen for the chronically ill and disabled. Amen for the children down at the border. Amen for the victims of our law and order. I pray that you're heard, and I pray that this works. I pray if a prayer has been used as a sword against you and your heart, against you and your word, I pray that this prayer is a plowshare of swords. I pray that you're heard, and I pray that this works.
God, may we have the space this week to find all of those places where we have repressed parts of who we are, that we can check in with ourselves, that we can create space for others. God, that we can connect with you, that we can connect with love. And God, that we would be transformed by that it would change us to be more like you, to be more like love. We pray this in your name. Amen. Thank you so much for being here this week. We'll see you next Sunday.
Innocent words turn to lies, and you can't hide by closing your eyes.
When pain is all that they offer, like a kiss